So, my dad's been living in an assisted living facility, and because of his Parkinson's, his ability to transfer to go from one surface to another is very difficult
Mm.
because being able to get up and turn and pivot, the motor planning of the brain telling the body what to do, he struggles with it. He doesn't, his vision is limited. Put your hands on either side of your eyes on your face. All he can see is straight in front of him. So he starts to turn around to sit in a chair, and now he can't see the chair anymore, and he doesn't know where he's sitting, and he starts turning back towards the chair. So it's been a process. I've taken him to the hospital. I've or picked him up from the hospital, taken him to a doctor's appointment since he's moved up here a couple months ago. And we finally aligned a doctor's appointment with the facility he lives at, assisted living facility, has a transport van. These vans are great. They have a lift that comes off the back. You wheel the wheelchair up, you raise the lift up, you roll the chair in. There's buckles to lock the wheelchair in place and seat belts to secure him, right? So, yay, we have wheelchair transport. So we get there, they come out, they're getting my dad on the van. So my mom and I drive over in our car to meet them at the hospital. We leave the staff members to take care of him. We get there, the van pulls up. He's sitting in a regular seat. They have to stand him up and transfer him to the wheelchair. I'm watching this process painfully going, I could get up in there and help them do this much faster because I do this for a living. And so I said, are you guys unable to use the buckle down part for the wheelchairs anymore? And the guy who drives the van, he says, we're not allowed to do that anymore. I said, oh, did something happen? He goes, I don't know. It was started before I was hired. So my guess is there was some kind of incident where they didn't properly buckle down the wheelchair. I mean, I'm making this up because I don't know. All I know is they have the equipment in the van to be able to do this. And so instead of just being able to wheel the wheelchair up and lock it down, and then you get to where you're going and you undo the straps, they had to stand him up out of his wheelchair with no walker, turn him into these narrow little seats, sit him down there, buckle him in. And then when we got there, they had to get him out and put him back in his wheelchair. And all because of who knows the reason that something happened. And I just find it ridiculous. Like, why didn't they just properly educate the people on how to do this? Um, and it's sad and it's crazy and it makes me laugh, but it also makes me laugh with disgust. And things are made to be accessible. This van is made to be able to transport people in the wheelchair. And then here they are with this wonderful van, and they can't keep him in his wheelchair.
Well, hello, this is Don,
And this is Gina with Focused Healthy Family.
and this is podcast number 135. And today we're talking about barriers to better care. And we've been experiencing so much of this ourselves as to what we have to do to get past certain things to make sure we're getting the best care for your dad.
I just couldn't believe this today. The whole purpose of this van to transport him was to make it easy and not like easier on my dad and easier on the staff, right? So whatever happened that they stopped using the buckle down feature in the van, um, now they're risking both the staff who have to transfer him and the patient from getting injured from the process of transferring him into that chair and then back out of that chair. Um, and I just all it takes is education to know the proper way to do it. I mean, if something is broken on the van, but no, this policy's been in place for a while. I saw the equipment in there. I mean, it just makes me want to scream. It just makes me want to say, what are you people doing? What do you mean your policy is you don't use that equipment? This is not in the patient's best interest. Yes, there was an incident and something happened. There's an incident and something happens in your car, but that you get in an accident, do you stop driving? Do you never drive again? I mean, someone falls in the hall in the nursing home. Is no one allowed to walk anymore? I mean, this is just the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. But these things keep happening. And it's frustrating. And I've been working in this system for a long time, Don. I've seen the changes that have happened. And I know that changes needed to happen to make things better for patients. Years ago, nursing homes were known for physically restraining people if they were agitated or upset, or to prevent them from falling. They would use, you know, things that would restrict their movement. And then they started medicating people as a way of restraining them to minimize behaviors. And so they came out with all these laws to stop the use of restraints. And now we wind up with some ridiculous laws out there. And this instance with my dad today with the transport van. Um, I don't know. I just want to call somebody about it. I want to call someone out on it, that this is not in the best interest of my dad's care. And I don't know who made this policy, but I want to have a one-on-one conversation with them.
Well, and I think at least part of the problem is the fact that they're short-staffed, and they're
That
trying
had
to
nothing to do with the van today.
no.
That had nothing to do with the instance with the van. Staffing has nothing to do with that. Um, sorry, I just like
Okay.
that. I mean, what would staffing have to do with using things on?
Well,
There were two
I mean,
staff members on the van. They had to have someone sit with him because he was going to be in a chair.
yeah. Well, so it does have something to do with staff. So, you know, luckily they were staffed enough to have people to be able to transport them. So I don't know if all facilities have that.
Not all facilities have the van, but everywhere I've worked when they have the van, if someone's in a wheelchair, they wheel them up and they use the equipment and they lock the wheelchair down in place and it secures the wheelchair. That's the whole purpose of that.
Yeah.
And there are people who can walk on, or who can easily transfer into the seats to sit there. Um, but for my dad, I mean, that's the whole reason I didn't take him in my car, because it's an ordeal to do a transfer out of his wheelchair into the car. And it's hard on him, and so it takes his energy, and it's also a safety risk because of his limited ability to get his body to move the way he needs to, and because of his severe weakness. And uh, yeah,
Well, then you said once you got there, the facility itself had a lot of what you might call environmental issues or constraints or barriers too.
well, yeah, I was looking up, years ago when I was in college in the 90s, they came out with these ADA regulations. So the um, ADA standards for accessible design, and they passed these laws so that public places had to be accessible. The basic thing you think of is wheelchair ramps, so that someone in a wheelchair, a walker who can't go up and down stairs, can easily get into the building. Doors need to be wide enough to accommodate wheelchairs. Picture your houses from the 1960s and 70s. The doorways, especially into the bathroom, are too narrow for even a
Hmm.
narrow wheelchair, right? Things like that. So the accessibility. So, a lot of hospitals, so this doctor's office, the emergency room entrance is here, and right next to it is the entrance to the doctor's office. The entrance to the hospital has automatic doors. The entrance to the doctor's office does not. So I have to pull open the door and push a wheelchair through it. Then we get inside and they bring my dad into a room. He's dealing with a catheter and whether he needs it or not, and for his bladder. And they bring us in a room where the bed, whatever you call it, the table exam
Hmm.
is really high in the air, right? So obviously he's not getting out of the wheelchair for that. And then when they discover they've got to put the catheter back in, they need to get him on one of those tables. So then we have to go into a different room. Like, why were we not in that room in the first place? So that the table is lower. And yet, picture going to the doctor's office, right? Those tables, they sit up high, even if they're lower, they're narrow, I mean, this one was really short and it had a pull out for the feet. But thank God my dad was not a tall man because I mean, it's just totally awkward and uncomfortable. And so here's this 82-year-old man with Parkinson's who's got severe back pain, whose head and posture is like this. We help him to sit on the end of the seat, me and a nurse. You know, he's feeling fearful. It's a narrow little table. There's no rails for him to hold to. There's no walker to assist him with his transfer. Um, Simple things like have a walker in the office. Like, why can't these offices? This is a urologist office. Everyone in that waiting room is over the age of 60. They should be equipped for the elderly. There should be walkers. They're cheap. You can get them at Goodwill. Go get some walkers, people. There should be, I mean, anybody who's going to examine an older person, the the hospital bed, whatever, the table needs to have like a little grab a bar on it for them to pull themselves and to hold themselves and support themselves. Um,
It's too bad you can't do like a doctor's assessment like you do a home assessment for patient, that you could go in and help
I
them.
I don't know if it's going to listen to
Yeah,
me.
well, but I mean, that would be a neat thing
Yeah,
to be
I
able to
just,
do if you
well,
could do it.
my dad's been in several hospitals, multiple times over the past, what, 5, 6 years. His back surgery was back in 2016. Um, and the emergency departments are terrible. A lot of big cities have pediatric emergency departments. They're often separate staff, they're kid friendly, pictures on the walls. They need a geriatric emergency department. The people need to be trained in dementia because you're often dealing with that. And there needs to be accessible things in place for for the geriatric population. There is a large geriatric population right now, and the staff is not educated well enough, and the setup of the environment is not conducive to helping these people. And I could make a long list of things that they need to do.
Well, and you think about it too, is that you mentioned the pediatric, even those aren't set up that well for kids. There's a lot of things in there that need, so it kind of,
I guess
I,
my point was that they've made that effort.
yeah,
They've
no,
made that effort to make, pediatric emergency centers. They have their, separate areas for them, but
but
they're,
I guess they kind of like based the still based it on just the old-fashioned emergency room in a way for either side of it. They didn't adapt. They did, they made, like you said, they made a separate pediatric, which is great, but they still based it on, just an emergency room. They didn't really fit it even for kids. And now I wish I'd do that same for, make a separate one for, like you say, for the senior population and then fit it properly for them.
yeah. And there, when there's simple things that you can do, like having a walker. We were somewhere. My dad needed to step on the scale. This has been a while back. And somewhere I went, they had a walker over their scale. Like, oh, yeah, simple. Just put it there. But somewhere we went, they didn't have that. But there are some simple things that can be done. And, I don't know who makes those tables that go in doctors' offices, but uh, the design is terrible. And I just they're not picturing getting up there. I mean, if you're injured, even if you don't even have to be geriatric population, you have a broken arm or a broken leg or back pain or something, um, just having a bar, like a railing on it to help pull yourself and scoot yourself and move yourself. You're at the doctor's office. You're not there because you're healthy unless you're there for a well visit.
Mhm.
um, I just it boggles my mind. You are dealing with senior, I mean, urologist. Come on. Yes, I took one of my kids to the urologist, but most of the time, people having issues with their bladder, they're older. So this is a common population for you. And I don't know.
Well, it's the little things that the rules miss, that the ADA kind of rules
Well, yeah. So
miss.
looking at so I pulled up the standards. So, architectural barriers, you have to have a handicap accessible bathroom. It has to be large enough to fit a wheelchair in place. I was trying to pull up the standards to see exactly what, they spell out. Um, so this is a US government regulation that went into effect first in 1991, and then they did a revision of it. Title One, Title Two, and Three regulations. Um, so you have to have a bathroom that you can get a wheelchair into. There needs to be grab bars in there. The toilet needs to be a higher height. Um, but the thing is, they don't specify it, I think, in enough detail, because sometimes the way the stall is situated, it still can be awkward to get onto the toilet. Um, or my favorite is, where do they put the toilet paper roll? When I started working in rehab, I worked with people with hip replacements, and the old way they do hip surgery, and they still do that this time, you're restricted with bending at your waist. And so they have a high height toilet, and then the toilet paper roll is down here. And I'm like, or the opposite, you go in and it's high. And so someone might not be able to reach it. So it's like they forget about that, right? Um, having turnaround space with the wheelchair, right? You have to think about, there could be a person who's going in there by themselves and has to navigate it, or it's someone's helping someone to the bathroom and there's not enough room for a person to help navigate the other person in the wheelchair. Um, so they put regulations in place, and obviously what they've done has been helpful. Kat, what are you doing? Um, and yet there's so many things that have gotten missed. There's so many things that are not addressed.
And you mentioned grab bars. That wasn't that one that, and I don't know if I missed it, but you talked a little before about, they don't always put the grab bars in the best places.
Yeah, the location of them. Even I work in nursing home rehab facilities. I work in assisted living, independent living facilities where they make bathrooms accessible. Um, Shower bars. Almost every place I've worked, they don't put the shower right there as on the wall as you're stepping into the shower. They have them inside, but you have to be able to get inside the shower. And we almost always recommend a bar right here. And usually maintenance will add it at a lot of those like assisted living, independent living kind of places. But it's like, why don't you just do this in the first place? We keep telling you you need it. Yeah, the location of the bar can make a big difference. The seats, those stupid moldable, the shower inserts like a lot of people have, and it has the molded seat. How many people sit on those? They're small, they're slippery, you can slide off them. You're better off not having that, the molded in seat in your shower, because um, it's not safe. It's not it's not a good situation. If you're gonna have a seat in there, and some places have this, they have a fold down bench, and it folds up out of the way and it folds down. But it's a bench, it's sturdy, it's not slippery plastic, it's often wood or I don't know, a different surface than, you know what I'm talking about, Don, when you have those, shower inserts and there's that molded seat that sits
Hmm.
in the corner.
Well, there's one in your dad's room now,
Yeah.
and I mean, they use it, but yeah, it is.
Well, and we have a nice shower bench for him, and that gets in the way. Like
Mhm.
it would be easier. And there was another room that he could have gone to, but we liked the location of this one better, and it had the fold down wooden bench seat. And so you can also fold, if that doesn't work, you can fold it out of the way and put a different shower seat in there. Um, yeah, so those things are almost never a good idea because I've heard people say they've slipped off of them. They're not big enough sometimes. Um, yeah. So there's things they think they're putting in to help people, but it's not helping anybody. And yet they keep making them. Um, and why? Why? Why do they keep doing that? We learn from our mistakes. So there's all these different challenges, right? So, if you were looking to take your loved one to a facility, somewhere they're going to live, it's important to ask about the ratio of patients to nursing staff, the ratio of nursing assistants. Are the assistants certified nursing assistants, or are they just caregivers without that training and certification? And do they have a transport van? Is there a person on staff who can drive it? Sometimes they
Hmm.
have a van, but they don't have enough staff to have someone drive
Or
it.
not have a trained staff person that drives it, and that could be a problem.
And do they use the wheelchair? I don't know what the term is for it, but it's the wheelchair latches that to be able to trans somebody in a wheelchair. And
And keep them in it,
you're
in
right,
other
right. It's
words.
a question I would have never thought to ask.
Yeah.
Um, and the other big, so we're talking about barriers to better care. So years ago, nursing homes, we were talking about the restraining of people, right? And they used to restrain people. And so now they came up with these regulations. Um, An adult care home shall assure that a physical restraint, any physical or mechanical device attached to or adjacent to the resident's body that the resident cannot remove easily and which restricts freedom of movement or normal access to one's body shall be used only in those circumstances in which the resident has medical symptoms that warrant the use of restraints and not for discipline or convenience purposes. Two, used only with a written order from a physician, except in emergencies.
What did
Three,
what did you say? We're celebrating that part. What's
do
going
this
on?
with your fingers and you send balloons up in the air. The least restrictive restraint that would provide safety, used only after other
Mine's not doing it.
alternatives,
Sorry.
only after other alternatives have been tried. Applied correctly according to the manufacturer's instruction, used in conjunction. So, bed rails are restraints when used to keep a resident from voluntarily getting out of a bed, as opposed to enhancing mobility of the resident while in bed. Okay, so a hospital bed rail is a restraint, but there's no regulations that hospitals can't do that. But you go to a nursing home,
Hmm.
one place I work has quarter bed rails. They're small. They are not stopping anybody from getting in or out of a bed. They are used to help their mobility. It's written in their doctor's orders when they come on staff that they can use. It used to be that they had to take them all off because they're easy to, well, they snap on. It takes a minute, but they're removable. And that the therapist had to assess and determine that they needed. Now they do standing orders that if they're determined to be used, they can have them. Because I literally, when I'd evaluate people, I'd have to bring bed rails down with me, along with the walker and the wheelchair and the other equipment. But they're small. They're quarter bed rails. They're less than a quarter length of the entire bed. They are not stopping anybody from getting in and out of bed. They are aiding someone who's been in the hospital for a while. It's hard to roll over on your side. If you have a rail you can grab and pull on to be able to sit up in bed, they are an assist to that person to help their mobility. There's no way it would stop anyone from getting out of the bed because there's all this other open area.
Mhm.
So somewhere, someone decided that any kind of bed rail is a restraint. And so there are these facilities that we are restraint free and they allow no bed rails on the bed.
They probably have a lot of falls.
I can give you 101 reasons why that is a bad idea. And then they're like, oh, but someone got their hand caught in the device. It's like when I read these regulations, it had nothing to do with people getting caught up in them. I mean, I guess if you get caught up in them and then you can't get up, I don't know. I'm reading what it says, and what they're telling me does not make any sense. Um, you know, it's to help enable them to more safely do things. Yes, we don't want people getting up out of bed, but if they're going to anyhow with someone with dementia and they can't remember what you tell them, at least if they have something secure to hold on to when they're standing up, it's far better than not having that. It doesn't, and like I've had people tell me, well, then they think they can get up if the bed rail's there. Like, what? Whose brain goes, oh, I don't think I can get out of bed. Oh, there's a bed rail. I can get out of bed. Um, these things that they're telling me, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense when I look at the regulations for it. And so, um, I challenge you, and I challenge you to look at this. The cat is going to knock things over. Um, and isn't it crazy that you're in the hospital and you have full length bed rails and then you go to another facility and all of a sudden you have none? Because it's okay in the hospital to have them. And yes, you do have a lot more staffing at the hospital. You have people right there, you have people ready, right? And they do have great things like these alarms that you put under someone's um in their mattress or their chair, and it goes off when they go to get up to alert people. Those are great things to utilize, but some of these other facilities aren't even using those devices. And I don't know what other regulations have come down because there's certain things that seem to not want to be used in assisted livings versus nursing homes. But then there's nursing homes that claim, they're telling me things like if the state regulation company, they come in to assess the facility and make sure it's up to standards, they would get a fine for having a bed rail on the bed. And yet I know of facilities that are highly rated that have them. So what's the difference here, people? There's these rules and then there's these misinterpreted rules and there's things have just gone way out of hand.
Can a patient or can a caregiver, personal caregiver like the spouse or whatever, can they request one at a facility and get a
Oh,
better one?
get a better one?
Well, like you said, like instead of the quarter one, but like you've been talking about a more extended one.
No, my dad has none.
Yeah.
He has none. He has no bed rail at all.
Yeah.
All we want is a quarter rail. We have nothing. And they say it's not allowed.
Well,
And then the type they say that is allowed with an order, it's a pole with a round hook on the end of it. And to me, it looks like a safety hazard itself. Um, it's metal. Um, and it costs $300. And they say that's the only one that's allowed.
mm,
And we have to pay for it. I can get a bed rail that doesn't cost $300. It's not a safety hazard.
yeah.
And they say this is the only one that's allowed, and it's a $300 rail. What's going on here? I mean, you trying to help people? Or are we putting rules into place that maybe one crazy incident happened somewhere, like whatever happened to cause them to not use the wheelchair hookups in the back of the van anymore? But is that how we solve a problem? By saying, okay, no more? I
I
mean,
mean, it sounds like some of this could be the dollars and cents kind of thing, where trying to cut back on cost, by not having
no,
any
it's
bread.
cover your ass. They're worried about liability. And if someone got hurt with something, now they're going to get rid of it because someone got hurt when we use this. And so now we can't use this anymore. It has nothing to do about cost. It's costing them more when people are falling all the time.
Well,
When
but they don't. I'm sorry, they don't. They haven't really looked at that part of it. I don't think. They just look at, well, if we don't need a bed rail, if we don't have to have a bed rail up there, we don't have the cost of that bed rail. They're not looking
Oh,
at the
no,
cost
it's
of
not.
people
It's
falling
no,
on.
we would be happy to buy a bed rail and put it there.
Yeah,
And
no.
places that I work allow it. The family has to purchase it. It's just places are not allowing it.
Mm,
They're saying you're not allowed to have it. And yet there's other places that do allow it. So we're all in the same state. This is in the state of North Carolina. Why is it go on different from one place to another? And is it amount to the fact that somebody got injured somehow from some incident and
yeah.
their method to solve that is to take things away for everybody? And is that really in the person's best interest? There are Bill of Rights for residents of nursing homes and senior care centers, and things that are supposed to help enable them to be more independent and to provide the best care for them. And you are taking away care. You're taking away independence. You're taking away best care practices by making these blanket laws and following them to what I would call a crazy extreme.
Right.
Um, because you know, I it used to be they over restrain people, right? And then they say, okay, this is bad. And then you're
Go
like,
the other,
and
the
it's like,
pendulum
what
swings.
about the people? What about the people that's affecting it? What about them and their quality of life? Can't we, shouldn't that be the bottom line? And I know other places I work, that doctor has to write an order to have the bed rail in place. So if a doctor writes an order to have it in place, then um, why can't it happen? Um, so, you're dealing with these kinds of things. I just wanted to, if you're dealing with a loved one, in this kind of situation, who can help you advocate for you and your loved one. So there's something called an ombudsman, OMBUDSMAN. So they have ombudsmen. They are government employees who investigate and try to get down to um, issues. And so they have them for long-term care centers. They have them for hospitals in different settings, and you can reach out to them. You can find your state buds person for long-term care, and you can call them and they can help you advocate for your loved one. And when there are problems going on, when you're noticing, problems in a facility, the way it's being run, poor care practices or anything, um, that's someone who can help you in advocating for these things and speaking up for your loved one and asking questions and asking why, and you know um, treating people as individuals and not having blanket rules that don't apply well to everybody, is not serving our senior population. It is not serving them when they require being in even a doctor's office, a hospital, or especially in a facility, whether it's short-term rehab or whether they need to live long-term in a place that provides additional care and support. We need to have better rules in place. We need to have better practices. We need to have better environmental settings for them to make things safer and more accessible, safer for them and for the caregivers caring for them. And um, what else can we do? I would love to have, I'm looking forward to setting up some interviews for people that deal in these different avenues. I'd love to hear from you if you are anyone who has been in this kind of situation or in a position to advocate for people or make changes. Please reach out to us because we'd love to interview
Well,
you and
get you out here, get you in front of the audience,
have you on the podcast, because it may sound simple or silly, like, okay, he's only there for a little bit and at the doctor's office, okay, it was awkward, he was uncomfortable, but my father's at the end of his life. He's in a lot of pain. Having to sit in that table for 30 minutes or whatever,
well, it takes his energy, makes him weaker,
it
you
can
know.
cause agitation.
Mm,
Um, preventative care, preventative. Let's prevent a
mm.
bigger problem here. Let's put things into place to make things better for people in the long run. I feel like I've had a rant session here, Don. We've covered some different topics about providing better care, having support, having environment setups. I know we've done other podcasts on environmental adaptions and those types of things. And if you have a particular situation, you can join us at our upcoming Ask the OT session, which we do on YouTube. You can join us live or you can send us your questions in advance. It's about 20, 30 minutes where I go on and answer questions about caring for aging loved ones. And the next one is coming up October 9th, which is a Wednesday at noon Eastern Standard Time, and October 21st, it's a Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that's an opportunity for you to ask me questions and get ideas for your personal situations, the struggles that you have. And, I also do that as a consulting practice.
Well, and I help on the other side of it with the anxiety, the stress, things that we go through,
Yeah, Don, I could have used to tap through this entire podcast because
Yeah, but that
it
would have been a good
aggravates
idea for me
me.
to be doing that. I didn't
It
think
could have
about
been
that, but that would have
tapping,
been,
even though
even though,
I am
yes,
so sick and tired of these rules that are making it harder for my dad to
sick and
live.
tired of
I
being
am
sick and
really
tired.
tired of these rules. But yeah, no, I have to practice these skills. Otherwise, I
Mhm.
go
Well, and
running through
it's important,
the doctor's office walls going, "What's wrong with people?"
well, we have to always consider with any of this is self-care because as a caregiver, you've got to take care of yourself first. And that's, so yeah, the venting today was okay because you've had a rough day. You've had to, with your
Day,
day. Well, yeah,
day.
well, I mean,
Since
we're just going
moving
to
my
narrow it
dad
down to
in
today.
end of June, we moved him into the facility. It is now the middle of September. We're almost at
Yeah, it's
3 months, and there's a lot that's happened. As
yeah,
I told my mom, I said, I've been to this hospital. This is a funny story to end on. Um, so the doctor's office is connected to the emergency room entrance of the hospital. So I'm waiting for the van to show up with my dad on it. My mom dropped me off. She went to park the car. There's transport people that work in the hospital. If you have to go to the x-ray, if you have to go from here to there, they also sometimes transport someone outside to wait for the person to pull up with the car. So this young woman is there transporting, and I'm like, I've seen her before. She's transported my dad. And she actually looked at me and said, "You look familiar." I'm like, that's how many times my dad's been in the hospital. She recognized me. She's like, "Is it your mom or your dad?" I'm like, "Dad." She's like, "Is he in the hospital again?" I'm like, "No, this time we're just going to the doctor's." And she was very nice and had a conversation with me. But I mean,
yeah, that's how often
less
we.
than 3 months, because I told my mom he had 5 hospital trips. She's like, "5?" I'm like, "Only twice was he admitted, but the other times were to the
Yeah,
emergency room." And
yeah, we
it's
can.
happened. So this has been our podcast, wanting better care for our aging loved ones, wanting to advocate for it, looking at the challenges, asking the questions, knowing what to do to help get that better care. So if you've enjoyed this podcast or you're wondering, are all of our podcasts Gina ranting? Please check out all of our podcasts, and you can see them all at focusedhealthyfamily.com. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love your feedback. We do interviews with people as well on our podcasts. We'd love to know what you'd like to hear more of. What questions do you have? What topics do you want us to cover? So please reach out to us. Like Don said, he does EFT coaching with people. I work consulting with people, caring for aging loved ones. Is as specific as helping your own situation with whatever your loved one is dealing with, helping to understand them, their dementia, their, behavior or physical or mental limitations, and how you can best get the care for them. By consulting with me, I can more specifically help you in your personal situation, but you can also join in on one of our Ask the OTs, where I answer more general questions and cover different topics. Be sure to tune in every Thursday for this podcast, and view us on social media, on Instagram, on Facebook, all those places, right, Don?
Yeah.
And remember, how you speak to your children and your loved ones today shapes their future and yours.